The text message arrived 3 days before Christmas. Due to limited seating, we won't be able to accommodate you at the gala this year. Thank you for understanding. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The message wasn't from some random event organizer. It was from my future mother-in-law, Victoria Harrington. For 2 years, I had been engaged to her son, Ethan. During those 2 years, Victoria had never openly liked me, but she'd always hidden her criticism behind polite smiles. At least, until now. I called Ethan immediately. Did your mother really uninvite me from the Christmas gala? Silence. Then a long sigh. I was hoping she'd change her mind before telling you. My stomach dropped. So you knew. Alyssa, please don't be upset. Don't be upset, I repeated. Your mother just uninvited me from a family event. Ethan hesitated. Then he said the words that shattered me. She thinks the gala is important for networking. And she feels, you might not fit in. I already knew what he meant. Victoria came from old money. Her friends owned companies, luxury hotels, and investment firms. I was a nurse working 12-hour shifts at a city hospital. According to her, I wasn't the right kind of woman. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I missed the party. Because I realized I might never be accepted. Christmas Eve arrived. While Victoria's guests prepared for champagne and luxury dining, I volunteered for an extra shift at the hospital. The emergency room was packed. Children with fevers. Elderly patients struggling to breathe. Accident victims. For 12 exhausting hours, I barely sat down. Then, around 8 p.m., everything changed. The hospital doors burst open. A frantic man rushed inside carrying an unconscious woman. The entire emergency team sprang into action. I froze when I recognized the patient. It was Victoria Harrington, my future mother-in-law. And she wasn't breathing. For a split second, I couldn't move. Victoria Harrington. The same woman who had decided I wasn't worthy of attending her Christmas gala. The same woman who had called me, just a nurse. Now she lay unconscious on a hospital stretcher. But personal feelings had no place in an emergency room. I immediately stepped forward. Let's move. Doctors, nurses, and specialists rushed into action. The man who had carried her in turned out to be one of Victoria's closest friends. Please save her, he begged. She collapsed during the gala. The monitors began beeping rapidly. Victoria's blood pressure was dangerously low. The attending physician started giving orders. I assisted without hesitation. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Victoria's breathing stabilized. The room collectively exhaled. She was alive. As the crisis settled, I stepped outside to gather myself. My hands were trembling, not because of the medical emergency. Because I couldn't stop thinking about the irony of it all. Tonight, I wasn't good enough to attend her party. Yet I was good enough to help save her life. Around an hour later, Ethan rushed through the hospital doors. His face was pale. Alyssa. He wrapped his arms around me. Mom's going to be okay. I nodded. Relief washed over his face. Then he noticed the exhaustion in my eyes. Were you part of the team helping her? I simply nodded again. Ethan looked stunned. You stayed. The question hurt more than I expected. What was I supposed to do? I asked quietly. She's my patient. His eyes filled with guilt. Before he could respond, a doctor approached. She's awake. We followed him to Victoria's room. She looked weak, smaller somehow. The powerful woman who usually commanded Every room she entered now looked frightened. Her eyes slowly moved around the room. Then they landed on me. The nurse standing beside her bed. For several seconds, she stared. Confused. Then realization appeared on her face. "Why you?" The doctor explained everything. How the emergency team had acted quickly. How every second had mattered. And how I had been one of the first nurses to respond. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely ashamed. But before she could speak, another emergency call echoed through the hospital. I was needed elsewhere. Duty came first. I turned and started walking toward the door. Then I heard Victoria's weak voice behind me. "Alyssa." I stopped. "I'm sorry." The room fell silent. Those two words shocked everyone. Especially Ethan. But deep down, I wasn't sure an apology could erase 2 years of judgment. What I didn't know was that Victoria had already made a decision. A decision that would completely change Christmas Day. And leave every guest from her gala speechless. The ballroom fell silent. Victoria stared at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Then the event host approached the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "before we continue tonight's celebration, Mrs. Harrington has requested to say a few words." More than 500 guests turned toward Victoria. My heart pounded. I had no idea what she was about to do. Victoria stepped behind the microphone. For a moment, she simply looked around the room. Then her eyes found mine. "I owe someone an apology." A murmur spread through the crowd. Victoria took a deep breath. For years, I judged people by their social status, their income, and their connections. The room became completely still. I believed success could only be measured by wealth. Her voice cracked. "Then a few nights ago, I nearly lost my life." Everyone listened carefully. The person who helped save me wasn't a celebrity. She looked directly at me. It wasn't a billionaire. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. It was a nurse. The entire room turned toward my table. I wanted to disappear. Victoria continued. "While I was lying helpless in a hospital bed, Alyssa spent hours caring for me." Tears filled her eyes. Not because she had to. Not because she wanted recognition. But because helping people is who she is. The audience began applauding. Victoria raised her hand. "I'm not finished." The applause stopped. "Alyssa, I need you to know something." My throat tightened. "I was wrong about you." The words hit me harder than I expected. "I thought your profession made you ordinary." Victoria shook her head. "But there is nothing ordinary about spending your life saving others." A few guests wiped away tears. Even Ethan looked stunned. Victoria stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me. Then, in front of everyone, she hugged me. A real hug. Not the stiff, polite ones she'd given me before. This one was genuine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The ballroom erupted into applause again. For the first time in years, the walls between us finally seemed to disappear. But the biggest surprise of the night was still waiting. As the applause faded, Ethan suddenly took the microphone. And the look on his face told me he was about to change both of our lives forever. The applause slowly faded. Ethan stood at the center of the ballroom holding the microphone. A strange smile appeared on his face. The kind of smile that made my heart race. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I wasn't planning to do this tonight." The guests exchanged curious looks. Victoria stepped beside him. For once, she seemed just as surprised as everyone else. Ethan looked directly at me. "Alyssa, Would you come up here? My hands trembled as I walked toward the stage. 5 days ago, I had been told I wasn't welcome at this event. Now hundreds of people were watching me walk to the front of the room. When I reached him, Ethan took both of my hands. His eyes filled with emotion. For 2 years, you've loved me through every challenge. I felt tears forming. You've worked impossible hours. You've missed holidays. You've comforted strangers during the worst moments of their lives. The room was silent, and somehow, after everything, you still find reasons to be kind. His voice cracked. When my mother needed help most, you didn't think about the hurt she caused. You helped her anyway. Several guests wiped away tears. Then Ethan reached into his pocket. The entire ballroom gasped, because he dropped to one knee. My heart nearly stopped. Alyssa. His voice shook. 2 years ago, I asked you to marry me. He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a beautiful diamond ring. But tonight, I want to ask you something even more important. Tears streamed down my face. Will you promise to spend the rest of your life with me, knowing that from this day forward, I will always choose you first? The room held its breath. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I laughed through my tears. Yes. The crowd exploded with cheers. Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger. Then he stood and wrapped me in his arms. The applause lasted for several minutes. But then Victoria walked onto the stage once more. She held up a champagne glass. I have one final announcement. Everyone quieted down. Victoria smiled at me. The wedding will be hosted at my estate. The crowd cheered again, and every nurse from Alyssa's hospital is invited as an honored guest. The room erupted. Many people stood to applaud. Victoria raised her glass. Tonight, I learned that a person's worth isn't measured by their title, wealth, or social status. She looked directly at me. It's measured by their character. The ballroom rose to its feet. Standing ovation. 500 people applauding. Not for a wealthy businesswoman. Not for a politician. Not for a celebrity. For a nurse. The very person who had once been called just a nurse. And in that moment, I realized something. The greatest victories aren't about proving people wrong. They're about showing them a better way to see the world. That Christmas became the most unforgettable day of my life. Not because I was finally accepted, but because kindness succeeded where pride had failed. And that changed everything.